Chinese New Year, the year of the ox, and welcome to the 5 New Year's Wellness Challenge with your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi. We are celebrating the Chinese New Year with the 5 elements of acupuncture: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Alemi, and welcome to my 5 days wellness challenge. If you haven't been here, and welcome back for those who have been following along for the past few evenings. So we have gone over the different elements of 5-element acupuncture. But before we go into tonight's elements, our next element, our 4th element, I'm going to go over the use of the color red during the Chinese New Year, because as we said on Friday, the Chinese New Year is a 15-day celebration, so it is still going strong. So let me see if I can go ahead and pull up my notes here for you guys so you can follow along. So the use of the color red in the Chinese New Year has a very long history. In fact, it's even can be traced back to the legend of the Chinese New Year. I think if you guys remember, if you were with me on Friday, we talked about how back in the day, it was thought that the Chinese New Year arose from a time when there used to be a monster named Mian Year who would attack the villagers on the New Year. It was found that he was afraid of loud noises, fire, and red. So since then, red has been used to both ward off evil as well as to bring in good luck and fortune. It's also why you'll also notice a lot of firecrackers, lanterns, and those sorts of things being used during the Chinese New Year. Now, some ways that it is said that you can ward off bad luck is to hang red lanterns outside your door, especially during the Chinese New Year. Again, it's said that the evil is not a fan of red or fire. And it's also thought that you can ward off bad luck by handing out red envelopes to the children. Again, the red will help to keep any evil or bad luck away. But on the flip side, to bring good luck and fortune, make sure to have a gift or money in those red envelopes, symbolizing the future good fortune of the coming year. And then you'll also notice that a lot of people will wear red. It's thought to be the color of prosperity. And this is kind of where tonight's little tidbit about the Chinese New Year ties into tonight's element of fire. It is thought that fire is associated with red and that it represents life, vitality, and flourishing. And now, since we had that little fun fact about the Chinese New Year, I'm going to do a little recap of the elements that we've already covered, since I know that some of you might not have been able to join us on the previous evenings. So on Monday night, we talked about the metal element and tied it into this year, which is the year of the metal ox. So we learned that the metal is the season of the fall, the color white, the climate is dry, that issues that have to do with your lungs and your large intestine can be treated by treating the metal element. And we also learned that any issues arising from the nose, the skin, the emotion of grief, even like your body hair, the fluids of the internal body, so think nasal mucus or phlegm, those are metal issues. So if you have any issues arising from these, so think respiratory issues, pneumonia, bronchitis, asthma, treat the metal element. Tuesday night, we talked about the water element, the season of winter and north, the color black, salty taste. It's thought that the water element governs the kidneys and the bladder. So again, any issues arising with your kidneys or your bladder. So in Western medicine, that's most commonly going to be what, like constant UTIs, kidney stones, those sorts of things. Treat the water element and you can help that. Of course, in Chinese medicine, we also say that the kidneys and the bladder govern the bones. They govern reproduction, maturation. So things that have to do with fertility, conception, growing, or structure, that's a water issue. We also say that the ears, the bones, the head hair versus the body hair for the metal element, those are also water issues as well. So anyone who has maybe, again, fertility issues, endocrine issues, adrenal issues, maybe they have premature graying of the hair, even if you treat the water, you can treat those issues. Finally, last night, Wednesday night, we talked about the wood element, which is all about the spring, up and out. Think about that chopping, that strong motion of the wood. That is exactly what the wood is in Chinese medicine. Its direction is east. Its color is green. We think about wind when we think about the wood. And it governs what we say, the liver and the gallbladder in Chinese medicine. And so if you have any issues that have to do with the liver or the gallbladder, obviously, but also with maybe detoxing, or if you have issues with your sinews or tendons, our guest last night, he talked to us about how he came originally for low back pain, a water issue, but then it ultimately turned into a wood issue because of everything that he had been doing, his posture, the working out, and how he ended up getting a lot of shoulder and neck tension. And so we treated wood points, as well as we did a lot of body work to really help get into the muscles. And then again, the wood element has a lot to do with stress or frustration. So if you're easily irritable, treating the wood can often help. So think about someone, I'd hate to say this, who might get a little moody, or pre-menstruation, or maybe someone who's just prone to anger, treat the wood. And so now, tonight, Thursday night, we're going to talk about the fire element. So the fire, let's see right here. It is the season of summer. Its direction is south. The color is red. The taste is bitter. The climate is heat. We say that the heart and the small intestine are part of the fire element. But what's really interesting is that the fire element actually has 4 organs in its system. So in addition to the heart and the small intestine, we say that the pericardium, that muscular sheath that surrounds the heart, is also part of the fire element, as well as something known as the sanjiao, the triple heater, or the triple burner. Now, this organ doesn't really have a physical form. It's not recognized in Western medicine, but it is recognized in Chinese medicine. In addition, we have the sense organs, or where the fire element opens into. It opens into the tongue. The tissues that it governs are the circulatory vessels, so your blood vessels. The emotion is that of joy, but on the flip side, also that of sadness or lack of joy. The sound is that of laughing. It governs blood, whereas last night we learned that the liver controls or moves blood. It manifests in the complexion. So someone who has a real ruddy complexion, or maybe someone who has a really pale complexion, we think about the fire element. It controls the mind. The fluids are sweat, and the energy is expanding. So again, think about the summer, that expansive energy. We're finally out and about. We had our spring. Now we're really going out. We're running around. We have all these vacations. We're out under the sun. Expanding energy, is that of the fire element. But before we move on to how the fire element can show up out of balance, I want to talk to you a little bit about the fire element type. So this person, or this kind of fire personality, they consist of someone who is passionate, creative, and authoritative. We'd like to say that the heart is kind of like the emperor of the body. They have a stable step, and they sway in their shoulders when walking. So again, expansive energy. There's a lot of movement with the fire person. They're energetic, believe in the power of charisma and desire. They have creative potential. They're intuitive. They're passionately emphatic. They're so passionate, creative, and authoritative. Again, those are really just some of the main characteristics I want to emphasize. They also happen to love sensation and drama and sentiment. Fire elements are usually not so concerned about material wealth. They're more concerned about social connections, as well as the more intimate side of things, so relationships. They tend to have a lot of confidence. They do have some worries. They're sharp. They're fond of beauty. Again, joy is the emotion associated with the fire element. Therefore, pleasure is the main focus of these people's lives. However, they can become jaded, driven to seek still more stimulation, so they can kind of overdo it. They don't know when enough is enough. So they might always have the best boundaries. So again, in health, they can be fun, loving, and romantic, but out of balance, they can be unable to sustain their interest and excitement. So they might not be able to stay in relationships long term. So they dislike being alone usually. So this is a person who likes and thrives when they're social, not someone who'd rather be alone, but someone who feels like they really get the energy boost from being around other people. By themselves, they tend to feel lifeless. And again, in company, they tend to come alive. They're easily excitable, and this can manifest as giggling and laughing and talkativeness. When they're not up, they're down. When they're not filled with excitement, they can feel empty and hopeless. Something to know about the fire type. Maybe this is you. Hot weather exhausts the fire people as they are hot by nature. Heat, again, is this climate associated with the fire element. So think of like the desert, right? They should live on a low salt natural food diet. And then some of these other things I'll talk to you a little bit later. But again, remember that you do not have to be a fire personality or a fire element to have the signs and symptoms that we're going to go over next. You can have signs and symptoms of any of the elements that we're discussing. So again, I go over the personality types of the elements because I think it's just something kind of fun to talk about. But it's really about the elements and when they're out of balance. And so what signs and symptoms show up. And then if you have those, that we are concerned with, because we want to tell you how you can treat those. And it's really about treating the out of balance elements versus figuring out and focusing on what your element is, that I'm kind of trying to focus this whole video series on. All right. So with that said, we're going to move on a little bit to the fire element out of balance. And I want to talk to you, because there are 4 organs that are part of the fire element, about what each of these organs are said to do, not just in Western medicine, but in Chinese medicine. So therefore you can kind of understand and get a better picture of some of the ailments that might come up for the fire element. So again, there are 4 organs, the first one being the heart, the second, the small intestine, the third, the pericardium. The fourth is a sanjiao. Some might say that it's a triple heater or triple burner. So the main function of heart in Chinese medicine is to govern blood. This includes what we call the transformation of the food and the air and the qi, which we take into our bodies, into blood. And this takes place in the heart. We say that the heart controls the blood vessels. So it's responsible for the circulation of blood, much like in Western medicine. The heart also houses the mind, what we call the little shin. So in Chinese medicine, the shin has 2 components. In this instance, that of the heart, the little shin is the one that is the mind or our mental faculties. It is said that the mental activity and consciousness resides in the heart. So that the state of the heart and therefore our blood will affect the mental activities, including the emotional state or our emotional states, in addition to mental activities and emotions. If in the heart, we also have consciousness, memory, thinking, and sleep. So if the heart is strong and the blood is abundant, there will be normal mental activity, a balanced emotional life, a clear consciousness, a good memory, keen thinking, and good sleep. So obviously, you know, some symptoms that could show up if you're out of balance. And then on an emotional level, the state of the heart determines a person's capacity to form meaningful relationships. And then when we talk about shin, there's also a big shin too, which is not just about the mind, but about all of the, emotional, spiritual components of the elements. So going on to the next organ of the fire element is that of the small intestine. And just like in Western medicine, we say the small intestine receives the food and drink after digestion by the stomach and spleen. So it controls receiving and transforming by separating clean from turbid. It separates fluids. So the good stuff that can be reused is transported back to the spleen, but the stuff that's kind of gunky, murky, that's then directed to either the large intestine or the bladder to be excreted from the body. So in Chinese medicine, because of this ability to separate the clear from the turbid, the small intestine is said to give us the power of discernment, the ability to distinguish relevant issues with clarity before making decisions. So discrimination between choices, whereas the gallbladder, which we talked about last night, it gives us the decisiveness to actually act on a choice, right? The gallbladder and the liver, the wood are all about doing. They're all about actually putting the plan into action. This one is about more of prioritizing, figuring out what decision to make. And then, of course, you may have some issues related to urination, again, because the small intestine does send things to the bladder. Next, we have the pericardium. This is not really an organ in Western medicine, but it does have a physical body. Again, it's the sheath that surrounds and protects the heart physically. So in Chinese medicine, we say that the pericardium is therefore closely related to the heart and the functions of the heart. It protects the heart as well as governs the blood and housing the mind like the heart can. And then points on the pericardium channel, or meridian as we call it, they can also be used to invigorate blood or cool blood. For example, a point known as pericardium 7 is really good for rosacea or acne, which we say is a manifestation of heat in the blood. Pericardium points can also stimulate or calm the mind. They influence the area at the center of the thorax. Do you remember from Monday night, we talked about a point called CV17 or conception vessel 17 between the chest on the sternum. This is known as the front move point of the pericardium. And because of its location, it can affect or influence both the heart and the lungs. Finally, we have the sanjiao. Again, this is probably the oddest for those of you who haven't studied Chinese medicine, because there is no sanjiao in Western medicine. It doesn't have a physical form, but the functions of it include mobilizing qi and then causing what we call qi. So it could be just, so think about fluid. So it helps with fluid regulation, getting everything from top to bottom, bottom to top, those sorts of things, particularly in and out of the organs. So think of issues between the upper, the middle, and the lower parts of the body, especially the body cavities. So sometimes to check if someone has an issue with their sanjiao, we'll notice that there's some circulatory issues. Things don't seem to be moving right, or things seem to be kind of in one place and not the other. And in a way that we will check this, it sounds a little weird, we'll actually check someone's upper, middle, and lower jowl. So for the upper jowl, those are the organs in the upper half of the chest cavity. So we'll often place our hand on the chest, check the temperature with our palm. For the middle jowl, that's the area between our sternum and above our belly button. And then the lower jowl is the area between our pubic bone and our belly button. If one of those areas is colder or hotter, then we know there is an issue with the sanjiao. Fun fact, for those with fertility struggles, often their lower jowl, so below the belly button, will often be cold. So with that said, let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms that you could have if your fire element goes out of balance. Again, we said that the fire controls the complexion. So if you have a poor or ruddy complexion or a flushed face, that can happen. Again, some things that make sense with the fire in the heart: angina or chest pain, palpitations, irregular heartbeat. Sometimes we can get clogged arteries, right? So arteriosclerosis. But again, because the heart, we say, is connected to the emotions and the mind, so we can get anxiousness, we can get depression, we can have manic or bipolar behavior. It can also affect our ability to fall asleep because of that excess emotions. We can also have restlessness, right? And then because we say that the fire element, like the heart and small intestine, they open onto the tongue. So issues with the tongue, like a painful tongue or tongue ulcers, or even issues with speaking or difficulty talking or stuttering, something I do a little bit, that can be a fire element out of balance. Again, then we can have someone who, in terms of the heart and emotions and relationships, someone who's really timid or they're extremely shy. But then we can also have someone who's really bad with trust or really doesn't have any kind of boundaries with people, so they don't know how to have healthy boundaries or relationships. Also, finally, with the sanjiao, we have like poor circulation. So a lot of women will tell you that they often have really cold hands and feet. And then something else we can do, again, heartburn, things more associated with the heart and the Western medicine point of view. So how do we treat the fire element when it goes out of balance? Well, just like we've done for the other elements, we're going to start with acupuncture and acupressure. So for acupuncture, I would often use points along the heart, the small intestine, the pericardium, and the sanjiao meridians. The source points, again, are points on that organ's meridian channel that basically activate that whole system. They're really awesome. But some things that you can do at home is acupressure. So some acupressure points. So I want to repeat again the one from Monday because of what it can do. So CV17, as you can see in the lower corner, is at the middle of the sternum, middle of the chest. It's really good for helping local issues. So if you think of chest tightness, if you think of angina or heart pain, shortness of breath, palpitations, this point is really good to kind of press on. So a gentle but firm pressure for about 30 seconds. It's also really good for someone who is having a lot of anxiety, like kind of like a rising anxiety. Next up, I'm going to jump over to what you see as PC6. So PC6 is known as innergate, and if you go below it, what's known as triple energizer or Sanjiao 5 is known as the outer frontier gate. So we have inner frontier gate and outer frontier gate. They're basically in the same location, but the inner frontier gate, PC6, is located about 3 finger widths on the inner side of your forearm, where outer frontier gate is about 3 finger widths on the outer side of your forearm. So what pericardium 6 is really good at doing, actually, some of you may know this point if you get seasickness. This is the go-to point for seasickness, but it's really good for nausea and vomiting. I do this point a lot for those who are pregnant and they're feeling a lot of morning sickness. It's also really good for helping with a lot of heart-related conditions like chest congestion, pain in the hypochondrium, cardiac pain, palpitations, hiccups, cough, asthma, but it can also do with emotional issues like irritability, depression, those sorts of things. Again, the function of this point is to open the chest, regulate what we call the heart chi, calm the mind, calm the shin. It can also harmonize the stomach by its ability to help with that like nausea or seasickness, and regulates chi. It's a very, again, popular useful point. You'll often find these bands that you can actually put and press on the point. Jumping down to Sanjiao 5, which again is right on the other side of the arm, it's like 3.5 finger widths. I don't know if this is the best picture. This point is great. I often use it too in conjunction when we have people who have boundary issues. Maybe their boundaries are too closed off or it's too loosey-goosey. But this point is also really good for helping everything move correctly. So if there's any issues with stagnation, think about someone who maybe up the arm has like shoulder pain or neck pain. This point is really good for relieving pain along that channel. And this channel runs from the fingers up to the side of the head. So any pain along that channel, Sanjiao 5. But this point's also really good if you got constipation, right? That's another type of stagnation and things not circulating or moving like they should. Finally, going to this middle picture, what looks like SI3, this is known as small intestine 3. If you make a loose fist, you can find where your metacarpal bone is for your pinky finger, right? Or you can kind of just take your hand, you see where your pinky finger kind of sticks out. There's going to be a head of the metacarpal bone here. You drop right below it. That's small intestine 3. This point is really good. Funny enough, for any kind of back problems, you would think, again, it would have to do with urination because the small intestine opens into the bladder, but it's really good for back pains. But it's also really good for pain of the head and the neck. It's said that it can even help with like malaria, acute spasms in the finger, the elbow, the arm, some more local issues. We also say it's really good for any kind of, again, more emotional issues like manic psychosis, So those are some acupressure points that I sometimes don't have people do, but these are also points that I often will needle a lot too in acupuncture. All right, so treating the fire element continued. Just like the other ones, we talked about dietary recommendations as well as lifestyle recommendations. So for dietary therapy for the fire element, because red is its color, it's recommended that you incorporate red foods into the diet. So think about red cabbage, red chard, radish, turnips, red potatoes, red bell peppers, beets, pomegranates, mulberry fruits, cranberries, red apples. Those are all really great foods to incorporate for treating fire element conditions. Some other really good foods that are suggested for the fire body or fire personality type include bitter greens, because the taste is of bitter grains, vegetables, dark leafy greens, beans, and seeds. These foods tend to keep the fire at bay. So if someone's fire is out of balance or excessive, avoiding an overabundance. But at the same time, we want to avoid foods that can cause that overstimulation so that they can cause that excessive sweating or maybe that anxiety. So someone who's prone to anxiety or a lot of manic issues or just, oh my gosh, just kind of worry. So we want to avoid stimulants in particular. So caffeine, we also want to avoid chocolate, salt, meats, and then like hot spices. So the fire element, they're already spicy, right? They're already hot. So avoid the excessive spiciness, but especially if you have trouble sleeping, if you have anxiety, or if you're restless, or if you were to look at your tongue and you have like a really dry red tongue, cut out the spiciness, get in more nourishing foods. As far as lifestyle recommendations, Number one is movement. Again, the fire in the summertime, it's all about that expansive energy, right? Last night we talked about the spring. We're starting to get out after spending all winter cooped up inside, which is especially true of us, or it's especially true for those of us in, I guess, northeastern United States. But I think a lot of the United States, we've kind of been cooped up, right, for the past year. So in the summer, that's the extreme outwardness, right? We're out and about. So you want to do vigorous exercise, vigorous activity. So building muscle, the short, high intensity training, HIIT training, high jumping, core exercises like fast races are really good for the fire type. We say no endurance or marathon kind of exercises because the fire element, again, it's about that outward expansive energy. Next, the fire element, again, it's all about that connection, right? Think about the heart, that heart to heart sort of thing. So it can be about deep connection, one-on-one, but it can also be more about like the party, the socialization. So try to do things, and I know it's hard at the moment due to COVID, but try to do things where you can keep in touch with each other. Have weekly meetings with people, have like happy hours, and as it starts to get warmer, go outside, meet with people safely, right? Just make sure you get that socialization. And finally, if you're fire type, it's really important that you know what sparks joy in yourself. So what sparks joy? You might have to sit down and journal or meditate or just take time and put some time aside and think about you and yourself. So that you can, particularly as you get older, know what brings you joy and what doesn't bring you joy. Now, before we wrap up and talk about some other ways that we can help with the fire element, and particularly the emotions, I kind of wanted to talk about the different treatment modalities in Chinese medicine, because I kind of talked about all this stuff, but I didn't really explain what these modalities are. So the first thing we have is acupuncture. So there's something called auricular acupuncture. That's use of just the ears. We're actually going to get to that in just a second. There's something called cosmetic acupuncture that makes use of the body and the face for cosmetic purposes. And then there's just kind of holistic or body or just like regular acupuncture, right? So all over we utilize points. And that's the use of a very thin, very fine filiform needle. And we put it into a particular point. We call that point an acupoint. And when we do that, it stimulates this biophysiological cascade in the body. So we try to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, to start producing and releasing different hormones, chemicals, neurotransmitters. And depending on what point in the needle, we say that different hormones or chemicals, et cetera, are going to be produced and released. And then there's acupressure. So acupressure is non-invasive. And that's why I kind of went over some points with you guys these past few evenings. It's because you can do this at home. So you find an acupuncture point, the same ones we would needle, but instead of a needle, you can use your finger. You can use maybe 2 fingers sometimes, your pointer and your middle finger. Some people actually have acupressure tools that you'll use. You'll find the point, you'll press firm, steady but gentle pressure on the point for about 30 seconds. Do that a few times. We then have different kinds of body work in Chinese medicine. We have something known as Tuina massage. This is like an orthopedic massage. It's like, it translates as to pinch and to pull, but it's really more about stretching and opening up the body and getting things flowing. We also have therapies known as cupping therapy, and there's also gua sha therapy. We kind of touched on this a little bit more last night. It's really good for people who have a lot of muscular tension and tightness. It gets things moving really well. And then we have herbal theory. We didn't really touch on this, but herbal theory kind of has its own theory in Chinese medicine. So that's a whole different video series. But there are some herbal formulas that are amazing to help with different kinds of conditions. And what's great about them is because these herbal formulas are a mixture of multiple herbs, there's less of a chance that there's going to be like an adverse side effect and more of a chance that it could be something helpful. Then again, we have dietary therapy. Each of these elements corresponds to different colors, different taste. And then we have exercise in Chinese medicine, like Qigong and Tai Chi are 2, probably heard of. Maybe not the most, interesting exercises or the most popular, I should say, in the United States, but they can be very helpful for certain conditions. And then again, we have lifestyle recommendations. Finally, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about ear seeds, which is kind of like using auricular ear acupuncture, but with acupressure. So auricular points and ear seeds. So the ear, we say, is a microcosm of the human body. Basically, it's like you take the human body and you put it onto the ear, kind of like reflexology does with the hands or the feet. So different locations on the ear are going to represent different physical locations, like on this graph that I have here, or different functioning systems of the body. So we can either do acupuncture on the ears, or we can make use of what are called ear seeds or ear tacks on certain points of the ear, and they can be used as a complement to the acupuncture treatment or as a standalone treatment in themselves. And in fact, the use of auricular or ear points are so powerful that in China, it's really common that in lieu of anesthesia, people actually just get acupuncture on the ears. In fact, that's how acupuncture became kind of famous in the United States in the 70s. So our then President Richard Nixon was visiting China, and one of the reporters over there following him ended up having his appendix rupture. So he needed surgery to get his appendix taken out. Well, he didn't have any anesthesia, but instead he had some needles put in his ear. And there are actually some anesthesia points, and that's what he got. He didn't feel the pain from the operation. He was wide awake, so he came back, wrote a report on it, and therefore acupuncture started gaining interest in the United States. But also there's something called the NADA protocol. So there is the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association, which has made a protocol that helps with a variety of ailments. It's very simple, hence why it says kind of NADA. Like there's almost like nothing to it. It's a 5-point protocol that is used on each ear, and it's really good for PTSD, trauma, right? It's also really good for addictions, whether it's alcohol, or even food cravings. And this is something that I actually have certification in as an acu-detox specialist. And I do work with veterans in Maryland. We use the NADA protocol because it is so effective for helping with trauma, as well as helping with some other conditions as well. So you'll see here, one of these 3 pictures is the actual NADA protocol. And so again, there's 5 points that we use. One of them has to do with the heart. So basically, each one of them has to do with the 5 elements we're going to cover. Shen Men, if you notice, all these pictures have Shen Men here. If you ever come to see me, you'll notice I always needle this point. This point is amazing. It's associated with like the heart and the nervous system in Chinese medicine. So, and you can read right here, it has a calming property to it. It reduces cravings, anxiety, and helps with insomnia. I love giving this point to patients to push on or to have an ear seat on. The sympathetic, again, that's associated with the earth element. It relaxes the muscles and calms the nervous system. The kidneys, it clears blood, reduces fear, provides access to the emotional reserve. So think of someone who has trauma or PTSD. The liver, again, helps to detoxify, reduces anger and depression. And then the lungs, again, more detoxification and kind of helps restoring or taking away that grief. And then as you can see here, yes, auricular acupuncture or ear seeds can be used for mental emotional issues. This one in the middle is how we would needle or ear seat up someone for depression, but it can also be really good too, as you see on the far side, for insomnia. And again, depending on where you put it, we can do ear seeds for high blood pressure. We could do ear seeds for palpitations or high cholesterol or high blood pressure. It really depends on what's going on. What's going on will dictate where we put the point. And again, it's an easy, safe, effective, non-invasive way to take care of issues. And so with that, I just wanted to thank you all for being here with me this evening as we talked about the fire element and how it can show up out of balance. Again, with the fire element, if you have anything related to the heart, the small intestine, the pericardium, or the Sanjiao or triple energizer, those are going to be treated by treating the fire element. And as always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And then for tonight's prize, because we did talk so much about auricular therapy and how use of the ears can really help a lot of the mental emotional issues, including just sleep and anxiety, I wanted to give away another ear kit. And because the fire is all about joy, I was going to send a super surprise, so I didn't want to give that away. But to find out who tonight's winner is, we've got to go to spin the wheel. All right, see if we can pull that up. Perfect. All right. All right. Looks like we have a new winner tonight. Fantastic. Don't worry, I'll be reaching out to you to make sure you get your prize. With that said, I just want to say thank you so much again, guys, for checking in with me. Today was day 4 of our 5-day video wellness challenge. We've talked about the metal, the water, the wood, and now the fire element. Tomorrow is our 5th and final element, and I'm so excited. One of my colleagues will be hopping on the call with us, so make sure to join. She has really in-depth knowledge of this final and 5th element. And again, it's really just going to help to put together all the pieces of the body system. So no matter where you're having signs and symptoms, you're going to be able to go back and figure out some things that you can do for them. And with that said, thank you so much. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and I will see you all tomorrow at 7 o'clock.